Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the absolute puzzle that is human personality. We're looking at the brilliant insights of psychologist Brian Little to figure out what actually makes you uniquely you. We're going to break down everything from the hardwired neuroscience in your brain all the way to the deeply personal narratives that actually drive your everyday life. Let's get right into it.
So who are you, really? I know, it's a massive question. But think about it for a second. Do you see yourself as this deeply intriguing enigma, a complex puzzle just waiting to be solved? Or are you maybe sitting there self-diagnosing yourself as, say, the 46th most boring person in the Western Hemisphere?
Well, here's the good news. Even if you honestly think you're totally mundane, or perhaps you consider yourself to be what Dr. Little affectionately calls a great thundering twit, the science of personality actually finds your specific brand of weirdness absolutely fascinating. Seriously, what makes you think you're boring is literally a goldmine of data to a psychologist. They're looking at the whole picture to see exactly how you're like everyone else, how you're like some people, and how you are like absolutely no other person on Earth.
So let's start with the baseline of human difference. This is called trait psychology, and it maps us out along these universal dimensions that handily spell out the acronym OCEAN. You've got O for open to experience, your audacious, maybe slightly odd friends. C is conscientiousness, the people who actually hit their deadlines. E is extroversion, obviously paired against introversion. A is for agreeableness, working well with others. And finally, N stands for neuroticism, on the opposite end from emotional stability. These 5 big traits are absolutely massive predictors for our overall well-being, our success, and basically how our entire lives will pan out.
Now, let's zoom right in on one of the most consequential traits in that list, extroversion. Just a quick, fun test for you. Did you know it's virtually impossible for an adult to lick the outside of their own elbow? Go ahead, try it. If you just awkwardly twisted your arm, you're definitely not alone. But here's the kicker. Extroverts are the ones who not only try that impossible physical feat themselves, but they'll then turn around and successfully lick the elbow of the person sitting right next to them.
And that hilarious visual brilliantly illustrates the core behavioral clash between these two groups. You see, extroverts absolutely crave stimulation. They need it. Put them at a party and they immediately form this magnetic core, completely drawn to the loud noises and the high energy. Introverts, on the flip side, are actively looking to reduce that stimulation. They naturally gravitate toward quiet spaces. And because of this, they totally get misconstrued as being antisocial. But that's just not true. They simply function so much better biologically when they can just turn down that environmental volume a few notches.
And this need for stimulation, it isn't just external, it's totally internal too. Take your morning cup of coffee, right? A stimulant like caffeine works absolute wonders for an extrovert who needs a quick boost for a 9 a.m. meeting. But for an introvert, well, if an introvert downs a coffee and is immediately asked to crank out fast, quantitative tasks, that overstimulation actively hinders them. They might even come across as incompetent in that moment, but it's literally just because their nervous system is completely overloaded.
Now, what's truly wild is how these traits bleed into our deeply personal lives. We actually have the data on the frequency of the conjugal act, intimacy, broken down by personality. Introverted men report about 3 times per month. Extroverted men, they're at 5.5. Introverted women sit at 3.1. But extroverted women, they are posting heroic, chart-topping statistics of 7.5 times a month. As Dr. Little hilariously points out, they are basically handling all the male extroverts and picking up a few introverts along the way.
But it's not just physical. These internal traits totally dictate how we talk to each other too. When extroverts interact, they crave closeness. They want lots of eye contact, and they love using diminutive names to rapidly force a sense of intimacy. If an extrovert meets a guy named Charles, I guarantee you within minutes it becomes Charlie, then Chuck, and finally, he's Chuckles' baby. But an introvert? Nope. That guy is going to remain Charles until the introvert is explicitly given a clear verbal pass to use a nickname.
It even goes down to the exact vocabulary we choose. Extroverts tend to operate in black and white, incredibly concrete, simple language. If a situation is a certain way, they're just going to state it plainly. Introverts, on the other hand, love their heavily qualified, contextually complex phrasing. They lean on these contingent weasel words, as they're called. They'll drop phrases like more or less, or as it were, or not to put too fine a point upon it.
And because of this massive divide, we end up completely talking past each other at work. Dr. Little tells this brilliant story about working with a super extroverted guy named Tom and dealing with a third highly problematic colleague named Michael. When asked about Michael's pretty terrible behavior, the introverted Dr. Little carefully tiptoed around it. He said, Michael behaved in a way that some of us might see as perhaps more assertive than is normally called for.
Meanwhile, extroverted Tom just rolled his eyes and loudly translated for the room, "He's an a-hole." Extroverts are just going to call a spade, while introverts will do mental gymnastics to avoid direct confrontation. So, what does this all mean? Are we just a bunch of pre-programmed traits trapped in these hilarious communication gaps forever? Are we completely bound by our ocean scores? Well, no, we absolutely aren't. Our personality is actually made up of 3 distinct layers. First, you've got your biogenic nature. That's your raw neurophysiology. Second is your sociogenic nature, which covers all those social and cultural expectations dumped on you. And third, you have your idiogenic nature. This is where things get really interesting, because this is the progression down to the truly idiosyncratic individual you.
Here's the absolute crucial takeaway. We really shouldn't be putting people into neat little pigeonholes. Because what truly defines that idiosyncratic you, the actual stuff that makes your friends love you, the stuff that makes you distinctively yourself, are the personal, core projects you've got going on in your life. It's your unique doings that matter so much more than whatever your baseline biological traits happen to be.
Think about a time when you passionately, deeply cared about something. Let's say you have a sick parent or a child in the hospital, and normally you're this highly agreeable, super quiet person. But suddenly, to break through all the administrative red tape and get your family member the care they desperately need, you start acting aggressive. You become totally disagreeable. In that moment, you are utilizing what psychology calls free traits. You're basically enacting a script that is completely out of character, all to advance a core project that matters the world to you.
Dr. Little actually uses himself as a perfect example of this. By all accounts, he is a profoundly, deeply introverted man. Yet, his core project in life is his fierce love for his field of study and for his students. So, at 8 o'clock in the morning, when his students need a huge dose of humor and engagement just to survive an exhausting day of lectures, this deeply introverted professor will happily tap into his free traits. He will literally step into that lecture hall and act like a booming, larger-than-life extrovert.
But, and this is a big but, faking it like that has a severe cost. We have to be really careful when we act out of character for prolonged periods of time. It takes a massive toll, and it eventually forces us to retreat. After stretching ourselves with all that exhausting pseudo-extroverted behavior, we absolutely have to seek out quiet, safe spaces. Psychologists call this finding a restorative niche, a place where we can essentially repair our fried nervous systems and finally recover.
And as you might guess, desperately seeking out that restorative niche can lead to some incredibly awkward situations. Just picture our exhausted, introverted professor literally hiding in a bathroom stall just to escape the overstimulation of a crowded event. And then, an outrageous extrovert marches into the very next stall and loudly shouts right through the walls, "Hey, is that Dr. Little?" As he brilliantly jokes, if there is literally anything guaranteed to constipate an introvert for 6 solid months, it's trying to make small talk with them while they're actively trying to repair their nervous system in a bathroom stall.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a completely different perspective. Instead of just taking another online personality test and asking what type of person you are, I want you to ask yourself a much, much deeper question. What are the core projects in your life? Like, what do you care about so passionately that you are willing to completely abandon your own biological nature just to see it through? Because at the end of the day, it's not the baseline traits you were born with that define who you are. It's the choices you make when it truly undeniably counts.